Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Yankees Farm Report. I am not Carlos, I'm Marcus, and this is Aaron. We're going to be talking about Yankees minor league baseball tonight. We're going to go through each level of the minor leagues, and we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to talk about some guys where maybe they have their stock up at this point in the season, some stock down, some guys where we would buy and hold because there's not a problem here, but maybe we expect something to happen a little bit differently later, and then maybe some guys who we want to get in on the ground floor because these are people who could take off this year. So, Aaron, we're going to start in Tampa here. If you want to tell us who your stock up guy is.
Yeah, so my stock guy up is Jackson Lovich. Just talking about Tampa generally, I think it's not surprising to see them being a team that's struggling offensively. That's kind of been the MO of the Tarpons the last few years, and just the way the Yankees draft, and obviously Dax Kilby isn't there right now, which doesn't help. But Lovich is a guy who, I think he caught most of our attention last year after the draft. He played 6 games. He had a 350 WRC plus, and although he missed the first week or so of the season this year, when he returned, he was hitting lasers. We are seeing a little bit more concern with the swing and miss. The K rate's been a little high, but when you have a guy who's hitting, his max exit velocity is 113.6 miles an hour. I just think back to Dylan Lewis last year, who he had a really bad April, OPS in the 500s. But the one thing I saw that made me be like, was a max exit velocity of, I think his was 113.9. You just cannot ignore that type of power. And, he's shown it. He's had some huge doubles. He's had a couple home runs. So yeah, I think it's, I think this is a guy who, especially in an offensive depraved farm system, this is a guy who who's moving his way up already. I would say he's probably in the top 20.
I like that call, the comparison to Dylan Lewis because of the athleticism.
Hmm.
That certainly something stood out about Dylan Lewis right away. And I think with Lovich, it's the same thing. We said this last week, but it's really exciting that he comes out and he's playing shortstop. So where he goes from here, it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I think that, I'm not sure why exactly they had him at first base last year. And I'm definitely, I don't think he's a shortstop, but Yankees have always been so good about testing these guys' athleticism and versatility. I'm not sure where Lovich ends up long-term positionally, but, for a guy who's 6'4" and pretty, he's a lean muscular, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
But he can move some. So it's, yeah, I'll play him at third base, play him at shortstop, put him in the outfield. He's just a guy who's easy to like and kind of easy to really, dream on a bit.
And for a team that doesn't really have a third base prospect screaming at you, seeing him move there could be a pretty interesting thing.
Yep, it's not that he's too close, but as a I think he's 22 now. I don't I think all of us would think he's not long for this level. He'll definitely be at Hudson Valley this year, and it's potential. Maybe he gets to Double A as well. So it's just definitely a guy I'm really excited about right now.
Okay, great. So, arrow up for me is Emmanuel Tejeda. And he did get off to a little bit of a slow start here, but if you look at how he's getting on base right now, I think he's walking at like almost a 25% clip. And he's starting to hit. The hits are piling up. He looks like a good baseball player. Now, I know maybe we're not talking about a guy with a ceiling like Jackson Lovich, who we just discussed here, or some of the other guys we're going to talk about today. But I think that's okay. I think going from somebody who might be, and the reason I call him arrow up is maybe he's a non-entity to some people. But I think that's a name that's going to be in top 30 prospect lists. I think that's a name people are going to know. I think this is a guy who's going to progress.
Hmm.
So I would expect this to be someone who climbs the ladder. And I'm not sure where he goes during this season, but I certainly think, he's the three hitter now for Tampa. This is the guy who I've got my eyes on there.
Yeah, and I think it's really good to have him fully healthy. In 2024, his tore his ACL, came back for 30-ish games last year. So that's just good that he's fully healthy and now he's, over a year removed from that surgery. Um, you mentioned the walk rate. That's awesome. I think the walk rate in the minors is less sticky, where, if you're walking at Tampa, that's one thing, but when you get to Scranton, Somerset, it's harder and you need to be able to make contact. But I think that while the contact, I was a little shocked there that first week when he was, basically hitting less than 100,
Right.
but had like a 700 OPS because all the walks. No, it's good to see him that contact's coming up quickly. If you take away that first week, it's definitely got to be over 80%. Um, I think he's someone who I've talked about a lot, on these shows with you guys. He's a guy I think is kind of a miniature Kilby. Obviously, like you said, he's not like starter caliber, high level caliber like Lovich or Kilby, but we look at Ahmed Rosario, who's been super hot. Why can't Tejeda be like a good utility player on that side of the infield? That's still a good outcome.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I totally agree with that choice. He's a fun little player.
Right. And, with the caveat for all of this, which I should have mentioned that we're talking about fewer than 100 at bats for all these people right now. And if we say anything about stock down, that doesn't mean we're passing judgment on them. This is just giving you a quick snapshot here in April of what we're seeing here. So who's a stock down guy for you in Tampa?
Yeah, so right now I have to go with Henry Lalane. I know that's gonna break Carlos's heart. Um,
He's not here. We
but
can say whatever we want.
um, yeah, with Lalane, he looked so good in 2023, and then two consecutive shoulder injuries basically cost him most of the 24 and 25 seasons. And when he came back, it was diminished stuff. And unfortunately, this isn't on Lalane. This happens to a lot of guys. It's just the the story of pitching nowadays. Everyone thinks of TJ and the elbow, but it's really the shoulder that can be the death knell for guys.
Yeah.
Matt Harvey shoulder. For some prospect people, Daniel Espino was a top 20 prospect with the Guardians, and his career sputtered because of shoulder issues. And I was excited with Lalane because he was healthy in the offseason from everything we know, and he got to opening day, and just from his two starts, the stuff just we didn't have that high 90s fastball anymore, and it wasn't sharp, and now he's down again. Apparently it's not arm related, it's lower body, so that's at least good news. But it's just I wanted to hold on to keeping him. I had him in my top 30. I had him, I want to say 14 or 15, because I just wanted to still hold on to that belief that that guy we saw in 23 was there. And it's just, right now, after seeing it another, season of it not being there, it's had the knock. I feel like, we gotta not, we can't expect 2023 Lalane to come knocking through the door anymore.
Yeah, it's like you said, they know how to fix elbows. They don't know how to fix shoulders all the time. So yeah, we're hoping. We're still
Hmm.
hoping on that one. I'm
Exactly. Like,
I'm going with Grayson Carter. Now, some people might say, well, we mean stock down because he's not really considered a top prospect, but he was somebody who showed up on, I think, the pipeline list, top 30 at one point, and he was a
and he was
fourth
still a
round.
fifth round pick.
Yeah, right. So he's a high draft pick. And there's a lot of talent there, but thankfully now that Tampa has a feed where you can watch a broadcast of Tampa play. I got a chance to watch him pitch because I was wondering, I saw the walk totals,
Hmm.
and there's an issue there. So I wanted to see what this was. And you talk about pitchers who have maybe trouble repeating their mechanics, and that's something that can cause controller command issues. So you watch him mechanically, you don't see anything jump out. It's not like Nuke Lelouch out there on the mound. You see him mechanically looking sound, but the more pitches you watch, it seems like he has trouble with his release point being consistent. So one dart at 98 on the black in the lower quadrant, next to one yanked off the backstop. And so the ball's coming out too early, too late. And it seemed like they had trouble putting the barrel on him for sure. And there is lightning in that right arm. And I don't know because I can't see where his foot strike is. Maybe that's got
Hmm.
something to do with it. But it's not like I hope it's not. And that's why I've almost felt sympathy in the sense that this poor guy has all this talent and it just comes down to, 1 inch up here is a foot at the plate.
Hmm.
And it's just this little mechanical change and he becomes a different guy. So unfortunately, I can't really take him with all that arm talent, can't take him seriously until those walks come down.
Yeah, and it was different because last year they tried putting him as a starter, which was, interesting strategy, and it just really didn't work. And although, in his outings, I know this year he's still kind of gone like an inning plus 2 innings. It's more of a true bullpen role, and you hope that, when you're out of the stretch and you had to keep things a little quieter, you would hope that those mechanics would be a little more sound. But yeah, it's, when you're not able to get it out of the same spot every time. It creates issue, and it also creates, it makes it easier for a hitter to read because if 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 you're not, putting that fastball and that slider out of the same spot, they can kind of detect what you're throwing easier. And for a guy who has as big of heat as he does, he doesn't have outstanding swing and miss rates.
Right.
Um,
Because it's
so
a
yeah,
lot
no,
of
it's
fastballs.
yeah. So yeah, no, I definitely think that's a fair, point. 'Cause he was a guy, yeah, like I was very excited about when they drafted him. You think about a guy who throws 101, 100. We all look at LeGrand and love how hard he throws. He's probably got the second fastest pitch in the organization. Um, but just yeah, unfortunately, he just cannot get that spot down right now.
Yeah,
Luckily as a reliever, I feel like there's less pressure um, to get it right away. You can be a little older as a reliever and still make an impact in the MLB.
that's
So,
true.
hopefully that gives him a little bit more leeway. But, especially in the minor leagues, you need guys who can, you throw strikes and you're not just putting out there for, short outings and having to work the rest of your bullpen like crazy.
Yeah.
So, at a point you do need to throw some strikes.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. All right, who are you holding?
Yeah, so I went with Alan Facundo. So my thought process here is when the rosters were announced, Facundo surprised me as a player who was remaining in Tampa. Obviously, he had the Tommy John um, that that he returned from in 2025, but he still pitched 30 plus innings, and especially when we saw a couple guys get I guess you can, I don't want to say rushed promotions, but aggressive promotions, who we'll talk about later. Um, I don't want to say put warning signs, but I try and have what the Yankees do, their actions. That speaks to me to somewhat in how I view players. So when they kept him in low A, I thought, that's a little interesting. That's concerning. He's looked great. And he had 8 strikeouts tonight in 5 innings, and I don't think he allowed a run. Um, I think for me it's just hold on to this guy. When he gets to Hudson Valley, we'll really start to see what's up. I think I've always held the thought that he's definitely better off as a reliever long term. So I'm not going to be concerned if he's having trouble in longer outings as a starter in Hudson Valley, but how this stuff plays with some of those guys is what I'll be looking for there. So yeah, it's just get him to Hudson Valley soon, please.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think he's a reliever too, and I think he's
Mhm.
overwhelming guys at that level with his stuff. So
Yeah.
I think you need to see him at another level and trying to be
Hmm.
challenged against a higher level hitter, an older hitter.
Yeah.
So I'm holding on Danny Flat, another guy I got a chance to watch pitch. It looks to me like a guy who pitches like a power pitcher, but I don't necessarily see the power stuff there, at least in its full form. I mean, he physically looks like he could be a power pitcher, but I don't know that he's got what he's going to have. So I want to see how his stuff develops from here. I'm certainly not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it's ineffective either. So a guy who pitches effectively, where he might have a couple more ticks in the fastball and a little more on the breaking ball too. So that's a guy I'm gonna hold on and see where this goes.
Yeah. And, looking at TJ's stats, his pitching summary models, he has a 60 grade sweeper and a 60 grade changeup. It's the fastball with low velocity that's a bit of an issue, but yeah, like, it's not bad stuff. And he's definitely been a steadying influence. So yeah, it's can he get a little louder with it? But he's been, I think each year you've seen him get a little better, and
Hmm?
this year is definitely, the obvious, the best he's been. And yeah, let's just see if he can make that next step.
Yeah. All right, who's your rocket ship here? Who you want to get before he takes off?
Yeah, so if anyone who's watching this reads my prospect notebooks for the Yankees Farm site, one guy I talked about this week was JoJo Jackson. He's another member of that 2024 draft class that featured Dylan Lewis and Brendan Jones and Xavier Rivas. Just a really strong second half of the draft. Um, Also a good first half with Ben Hess and Bryce Cunningham and but I digress from there. He played like 6 games in 24, missed all of last season except 6 games in FCL. So this is the first real look we're getting at him. And, he looks like a guy who, great ownership of the plate, but not afraid to take aggressive swings in the zone, which you like. That's, you want a guy who's going to hit strikes. Um, and why I say buy low is because right now, the stats aren't amazing because he doesn't hit the ball with great exit velocities, and kind of his bat path isn't the best, where I think he's hitting the ball on the ground too much. And if he can get that fixed, I he can definitely be a guy who takes a nice jump into that back half of the top 30, and can be a potential utility type infielder or outfielder, excuse me. So no, definitely enjoyed watching his at bats this week. He had two really nice battles with Seth Hernandez, the Pirates' top pitching prospect. So, um, yeah, just a guy I really enjoyed watching.
Yeah, and physically, I think he looks the part. So
Yeah.
someone you can dream on developmentally.
Yeah, just
And
at 23, the level's probably too easy for him right now. But that's also just because of the time he's missed. So another guy
right.
who I think the outfield wouldn't in Hudson Valley isn't too hard to find a spot for him. So hopefully sometime after Memorial Day he gets that call.
Yeah, I agree. So I think Tyler Boudreau is somebody to think about here. The latest ver or maybe one of the latest versions of the hey, don't ignore these guys because they're free agent signings. The Yankees, I mean, I think it's extraordinary what they've done in the last few years with undrafted free agents. And it makes you wonder in a 20 round draft, number one, how is it that all these organizations might not be selecting these people? That includes the
hmm
Yankees. Number two maybe gives you an idea of just how difficult it is to canvass the entire country and make sure that you've got a look at everybody and a good feel for everybody. So this is a guy where after just a couple of starts, you got to take him seriously. The stuff looks good. The delivery looks good. The results have been great. And maybe it's like you just said that uh, for 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 Jackson or Facundo. Maybe he's starting in Tampa because he was a free agent, but perhaps his level is higher than this. And that's something we'll find out. But for right now, this is not an innings filler.
hmm
This is a pitching prospect.
Yeah, and we've seen in his starts, his fastballs, peaked at like 94, 95, and it's had inverted vertical break of, up to 20 inches, which is very, very good. Um, we've seen, as the starts go on, that it's come down, which speaks to, tiring. So, it makes me think, yeah, this guy probably is a reliever in the long run. As a UDFA who like starter reliever, I don't care. If you were able to have a really good fastball at the MLB level, that would be amazing. So yeah,
Absolutely.
just another interesting find. And yeah, he's definitely, 41% strikeout rate in 9.1 innings right now. Very exciting pitcher. Definitely really good pickup. And, I think he goes tomorrow. So we'll definitely be looking forward to
Yeah.
watching
I,
him.
we're in that small sample size territory, but we like the small sample size so far. All right,
Yeah.
let's move up to Hudson Valley. Who is your arrow up?
Yes. So, another guy I've written about, and I think probably a guy if you're on Yankees Twitter and follow prospect accounts, a guy you've seen plenty of, Jack Siebert. We saw him briefly at High A last year in a reliever role where he was just disgusting. In 6 innings, he had like a 45% strikeout rate. They made the decision to make him a starter, and he's 24 years old already. He turned 24 like a month ago. So he's, advanced, but he has such sound mechanics and his release, we're talking about Grayson Carter not having a consistent release point. This guy, it's like watching him throw darts. and his pitch mix is, four seam fastball, sinker, and cutter, just like Cam Schlittler, the three fastballs that have made him so good. And he also has a slider. Not the same velocity, not the same pure stuff that Cam Schlittler has, but just throwing them all from that same spot. If you watch some of the swings hitters are getting off, they look, even the ones they make contact with, they're half swings, they're just late swings. And if you look at the hits, 'cause he's given up some hits, and he's given up some hard hits. He gave up a home run, he gave up a big double. But some of these hits are just bloopers that are just getting in there because they took a half swing, 'cause they didn't read the pitch, or or a sinker that cut off the batter's hands and broke their bat, but it just found a spot. He's been great, and he's walking no one. He throws a lot of strikes with his stuff. He has great movement, especially on the sinker and cutter. It's just this guy looks like a starting pitcher who will be, I, easily a good 4 or 5. It's been very impressive even in this short amount of innings.
In what, 15th round?
15th round, yep, another late draft pick. Texas Tech guys have been good for, a guy we haven't been able to see yet, Mac Hewer in the 8th round, Texas Tech, and then Chase Hampton in the
Yep.
6th round, 2022. But yeah, Texas Tech has been good to us.
And to have him be what he is now is already a huge win out of the draft. That we're talking
Hmm.
about him like this in his essentially his debut season, even though he got some
Hmm.
innings at the end of last year. So that's great.
Yeah, and we just mentioned Boudreaux, a guy who probably better in the bullpen, but you get why he's a starter right now. Siebert, I makes sense why they moved him into the rotation. Like
Mhm.
this is a guy who I think is built to be a horse.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's one where you can like, okay, I like it's cool to see a guy fly through the system as a reliever, but this one, at first I think he might fly as a starter. He's, I think that highly of him right now.
Yeah, that's great. So maybe this is cheating, but Caden Kent is my arrow up guy. And that's because I really like the swings. The swings I'm seeing out of him, hitting the ball to the opposite field, hitting a walk-off home run last night over the center
Hmm.
field wall. The swings look good.
Hmm.
The fact that he plays in the middle of the field, that's great. I don't know what his future is going to be defensively, and I'm not sure what level of defensive player he's going to be. But I think we're going to find a place for him if he can hit. And the fact that he
Hmm.
is hitting coming out of the gate is a big deal. Because I know this sounds dumb. I hoped he would hit like this. And it's April and he is. And I'm not talking about his statistics. I just really
Hmm.
like what I see out of him so far.
Yeah, and I think last year when he got to Hudson Valley, when he came out of the draft, he was a guy who he walked more than he struck out in college. Had some really nice pull rates with the
Which,
ball.
right, and
Threw
that's
some power.
I think he was known for pulling the ball, and there was a lot
Yeah.
about that in the scouting report.
Yeah,
So
he's
the
not a
fact that
big power
he's
hitter, but he got them. It's kind of like Brendan Jones. He got the most out of his power because he
yeah,
pulled the ball.
right.
And when he got to Hudson Valley last year, he was swinging out of his shoes, and he just did not look like the guy who the scouting report suggested he was. He's returned a lot more to that this year, and he's walking more than he struck out last I saw. Um, I think the loft on the ball is something you can still work on, getting more air, pulling it in the air a little bit more.
Mhm.
But I definitely see like a 15 home run type guy, and I would love to see if he can play some outfield because I think, he can play a respectable second and third. If he can play a little left and right field, obviously he doesn't have the speed of a Jose Caballero, but I could see him really fitting that utility type role. I don't know if he's a starter, but he reminds me of some ways of Rock Riggio, little less power, but more flexibility in the field. Because Rock Riggio was truly a second baseman.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was thinking about it when we were talking about swinging out of his shoes. There are some guys where let's just hope the ball is where the barrel is because it's not always going to be there. And I was worried that Kent was going to be one of those guys, but
Mhm.
now I'm seeing a barrel that is more accurate and
Yeah.
that's promising. So I'm
Ga-
excited about him so far.
Game has slowed down for him.
Yeah.
But going on the opposite end of that, a guy who looked rough, and then it's still looking, it's still sped up for him. My stock down guy is Core Jackson. 5th round pick of that draft class in 2025 with Caden Kent. He was exciting because he had, despite all the off-field issues, which we're not going to discuss here, He's a guy who had elite exit velocities, which, like I said with Lovich, when you see, exit velocities in the over 110, your eyes light up a little bit. And he's had a couple nice home runs, but it's just the contact's been a major issue, and also the ball's been on the ground a bit more than you'd like. And it's just if you're not hitting the ball, unless you're Spencer Jones, where you can kind of keep talking yourself into it, whether you watching or already out on him or not, it's tough right now. And he's been leading off a lot. I think actually they moved him to second, moved Caden to first and to leading off. But yeah, it's just a guy who can hit the ball so hard. If you can just refine that contact ability and start hitting it more and start hitting in the air, especially. Because he's an athletic guy, he's got speed, he can handle shortstop. It's just, you got to get the bat and the ball.
There were some things I thought that they would do with him swing wise in the offseason. And when I saw him this year, it didn't look like those adjustments have been made. Now, again, that's internet swing guy taking a look at somebody. But I think it's manifesting itself in the swings I've seen him take in the game. So there's talent there. But I agree with what you're saying about Core Jackson. You know, I've been excited about Pico Cone or Khan. I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong, Pico. I'm gonna go with Cone for right now. Um, and I still am, but he's injured, and that's I know pitchers get hurt, but it's tough when you're coming out of college and it's your debut season and you just got one start under your belt and people are already talking about before the season started that you're a future reliever. All these questions you could put to bed by coming out and having a full season. And I'm not saying anybody gets hurt on purpose. Of course they don't. It's not always under your control. But it's tough. It's tough to make progress when you're not on the field. So through no criticism of the player, and I'm looking forward to when he comes back. And I did like what I saw in his first start. He's an arrow down for me just because he's not playing.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, obviously TJ's a little different, but that was an issue with at Mississippi State. The good news, it is a leg injury of some sort. I'm guessing a muscular injury.
Yeah.
Um, But you kind of look at a guy like Ryan Weathers, and the question with him, obviously, he's been great for the Yankees. It was never about his ability,
Yep.
but it was about availability and
Yep.
the constant, leg injuries he was suffering. And that's, you have to start asking yourself, a guy who didn't have much velocity, if he's pushing to get more velocity and that's causing issues muscularly, what's that mean?
Yeah.
Obviously, it's way too early to get into that. It's only one leg injury, but
Right.
just to have that happen so early is, it's yeah, it's you flag that. It's a yellow flag for you, and it's yeah, I agree with that one.
Yeah. All right. Who are you holding?
So yeah, I got two guys here just because I think they're very much in the same. But what I talked about earlier with two guys who got aggressive promotions to Hudson Valley, Franier Herrera and Luis Serna. Especially, Fran, you're not even 21 years old yet. Serna, 21. Both barely pitched in Franier had 10 innings. Luis Serna, I think, may have had less I think he had like 7 innings in his return from Tommy John. I don't even remember if it was Tommy John. It was an arm injury. Either way, two young guys hadn't really pitched much of any last year, and both go to Hudson Valley. Obviously that means the Yankees see something in them, and I see something in them, and I want to rate them higher. And right now, Serna had that amazing first start, 7 innings, 10 strikeouts, I believe it was. I don't think he allowed a run. Looked amazing. It's been a little rougher in this two start since, today he walked three in the first inning, um, allowed a run. Got allowed 2 runs, excuse me. The next 4 innings were pretty good. I think he gave up a run in the fifth, but he no more walks. It looked better, but that first inning was concerning. And Franier is a guy who flashed a good fastball, flashed a really nice changeup, but yeah, command has been an issue. As you kind of think for a 21-year-old lefty, not even 21-year-old lefty. So my hold here is because I like these guys, and it's cool seeing them get that aggressive promotion, and I'm not worried about their struggles right now because they do have good stuff. So like, let's give these guys, we're talking about this stuff on early sample sizes for sure, but these are guys I'm not reacting to those early stats. I want to see what those stats look like by June.
Yeah, I agree with you. Two good calls there. I'm holding on Eric Genther, another free agent sign, and another guy where we're already talking about him as being a prospect, and he is hitting. The numbers look good, but it's not, the power isn't showing up yet. So
Hmm.
maybe he's hitting, but you could criticize and say, okay, unless he drives the ball and he hits it for extra bases, that I'm not excited yet.
Hmm.
I am feeling good about him. I think the organization feels good about him. And I'm not going to jump a guy out of the chute for not hitting for power when the hits are coming. So it's hold because I'm hoping that in the summer we start seeing the extra base hits coming along.
Yeah, right now he has a 54.8% ground ball rate.
Mhm.
Not good. It's something, I'm not saying this trying to say this critically, but it's been something my issue with Brando Maea is he hit the ball on the ground too much. And right now that BABIP is 469 for Genther. That's definitely going to have a correction, and it's what are you going to see when it comes down. Now on the flip side to that, what Genther does better than Maea right now is, he makes a lot of contact, only striking out 19% of the time with that 11% walk rate. If you make a lot of contact and you get on base with walks, that's like a decent floor. So yeah, it's definitely something where the package is intriguing. The other question is, what is his position?
Yeah.
Because he's been playing catcher and DHing, but he's been playing catcher with Josue Gonzalez, and
Mhm.
it's interesting because he played outfield for them last year, played outfield in college.
Right.
I don't have the best sense of, grading framing and defense back there. Um, but is this gonna be like a JC Escarra where you get a guy who played first base and then he turns into a great framing catcher? Yankees are really good with their
Hmm.
defense at catcher. We've seen that with Austin Wells going from a bat first prospect to one of the best framers in baseball.
Right.
Um, so yeah, like what is he back there? Because if he's a really good defensive catcher who makes a lot of contact and draws walks, that's a solid profile for a guy who can be a backup catcher.
That's right. And as we've seen, every other organization in the league will come after you because the
Yeah.
Yankees move catchers like nobody's business. And I'll tell you
Hmm.
the other thing he does better than Maeda. I think you might be able to throw the ball in the dugout, and Maeda would at least have a check swing on it. But I don't see Genther doing that stuff yet.
Yeah, no, he's obviously, he's 20, turns 24 in June, so he's definitely older. Obviously UDFA, but he does pull the ball a lot, which is good. Yeah, no, it's definitely a cool unrestricted free agent,
Hmm.
undrafted free agent, excuse me. Sadly we don't have a Parks Harbor this year.
I know.
I think he probably spoiled us when it comes to UDFAs, but obviously, and Rafael Flores is another really good one,
Yep.
but it's like that Dylan Hasso where he's like solid, and Dylan Hasso was a part of that return that got us Ryan Weathers.
100%. Right.
Yep.
And,
But
and
hey, he's a fun guy
if
to
you're not a
watch,
Yankee,
especially
you help the Yankees get players and make a name for yourself someplace else.
yeah, and in a Hudson Valley team that has kind of struggled for offense this year, it's really Roger Arias has cooled off some. It's really been him and Caden Kent right now that have been kind of leading the way for them offensively.
Yeah. So that in that sense, who's the arrow or who's the guy you're buying low on now, ready to take off?
Yeah, so another guy I wrote about, um, I think when we talk relievers, I don't I think in generally baseball, you don't grade them as high as prospects. If you're already a reliever, you know, as when you're a starter who becomes a reliever, because that includes and then maybe get some velocity bumps, you're throwing less. Like that happens all the time. That's great.
Mhm.
But when you're a true reliever in the minor leagues, it's harder to value. You're not as interesting in trades for teams. But when I watch Ben Grable pitch, that fastball is special. We don't have metrics on it because he's in Hudson Valley. So there's no public availability of the StatCast data, but we know it sits 95 to 96, even 97. If you watch it, it looks like it has some pretty good vertical ride on it. Um, and the best thing about it is he just places it wherever he wants. I watched his outing against Frederick on, I believe it was Wednesday, through 24, 25 pitches, all but two of them were fastballs. And I think of like so basically it was 22 fastballs and 18 of them were I 18 of them were strikes, 12 of them were swing and misses. It was impressive stuff. Um the one hit he gave up on it was kind of a flailing, just flailing bat in it and it blooped into right field. Um it's intimidating and he has a good splitter that plays well off it. He has a nice high release point, not as high as Trey Savage, but it's pretty high arm angle. And then he has a slider, which definitely needs more refinement, but will be good against right-handers. But it's a perfect repertoire for a reliever, and that fastball is so good. I don't there's other guys that they can go to for relief help right now. Obviously, Carlos Legrand, who is a guy who's been mentioned a lot as get that guy in the bullpen in the summer. Um, but I think it's a non-zero chance he could factor into this team, the MLB team this season. I think he should be in Double A. Honestly, I think he should be Double A right now. If there's anyone who deserves a promotion in this system, there's a lot of guys who've done well. If there's anyone who deserves a promotion, I think it's Ben Grable. I don't think he belongs in Hudson Valley. But it's just he hasn't gotten that love yet, which is why I'm saying buy him right now. Because if there is a relief prospect that is going to impact this team that is not already in AAA, it's this guy.
Bingo. That's a power delivery. And if you're going to try to sell me on a pitching prospect and the first two words you say are fastball, command, I'm listening. And
Yep.
that's what you just sold me. So
Up, down, left, right, anywhere. He'll put it there.
if that's where you begin, you're in a good place. My buy low guy is Wilson Rodriguez. I'm a
Mm.
believer. I don't have, I can't read you a long list of reasons to believe, but I'm a believer. I like the athlete. I think the bat's going to come around. I do believe he's been on a long arc of development, but he's still very young. And there are still a lot of professional at bats that he doesn't have. This is. This is somebody I'm going to believe it until I have to give up on it. So I know that the numbers aren't there, but I just feel like we're going to look up this summer and say, hey, remember we were talking about Wilson Rodriguez in April? Look what he's doing
Mhm.
now.
You want me to give you some numbers to help make you feel good? Because I like this pick also.
Okay.
Right now he has an 86 WRC plus, below average. His BABIP is 152. When we talk about BABIP, roughly 300, give or take, I would say like 20 points. That's the normal range.
Yep.
He is almost half the typical BABIP for a player. He's walking more than he strikes out, which is awesome.
Hmm.
Especially, you worry about a guy making that leap from Tampa to Hudson Valley. It could be a little tougher.
Oh yeah.
Um, and he's handled the plate discipline aspect well. Of his 6 hits, three of them are extra bases. One of them a home run, two doubles. And he hits the ball, right now it's just he's hitting the ball on the ground, which is, been a little bit of an issue, but it's never been this extreme.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's, I fully agree he's a guy who's developed nicely. He has really nice utility upside at the moment. There could be more. He's still only 21 years old.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. Obviously the start has been slow, but when you kind of dissect it, it's, the underlying stuff you want to see is there still.
All right. I do feel better. All right.
Glad we could ease your mind there. So yeah,
All right.
moving on to Somerset then, I guess.
I'm gonna try to guess who you're gonna talk about for Arrow Up, but let's see who we got.
So yeah, I'm going to talk about George Lombard Jr.
Good call.
Yeah, some of you might say, Aaron, he's already the top ranked prospect in the Yankee system. Like, how could his stock be any more up?
And
Well, with
yet,
him, I'm not talking about his stock in the Yankee system. I'm talking about his stock in baseball. Um, when last year, I don't think he was in the immediate Baseball America top 100. I think he was in the back half, but very early adjustment. They pushed him up into the high 20s. George got a lot of praise in the backfield during spring training, what we weren't seeing, and they bought into that. And we saw him kill it in Hudson Valley. Then he got to Somerset and he battled. He struggled. He still wound up with I think it was 111 WRC plus on the season in Double A, but it wasn't sexy. It was a lot of, tough at bats, not really hitting for power, struggling to get the ball off the ground some. He really did find a nice groove in after the All-Star break. I don't have the numbers on me, but he started to show more power. I think of his 8 home runs, I want to say like 6 of them came after the All-Star break. Um, and he looked better. But there was also an increase in strikeouts. So you're wondering, is his hit tool, can this, is his hit tool and contact tool going to be able to withstand, adding more power, or is it going to be sacrificing too much hit for power? Um, this year, the early signs look amazing. He has always been a tough, he's had a great eye, but he's swung at pitches. He's didn't swing at pitches you should swing at. When he got a fastball in the middle of the zone, he would look at it and he'd let himself get into bad counts, and that's where the strikeouts happen because his hit tool, his zone contact just wasn't strong enough to keep battling while he waited for his right pitch. And this year, he's been a lot more aggressive on early counts. He's still striking out a bit. After today's game, he didn't strike out last I saw in 3 at-bats. Strikeout rate will be below 20%.
Yeah,
It's
which
come up a little bit recently, but you look at those at-bats and their battles, and I can think of at least 3 or 4 where it was a 3-2 count that it went to. And like, if you're going to strike out, 6 pitch at bat, 7 pitch at bat, you tip your cap, you battle, that's good. Um, but he's being so much more aggressive in the zone and swinging at pitches that he should, and he's hitting for a lot of power right now. And a guy, he fell back in prospect lists. Baseball America had him in the 40s. I think Pipeline was a little more comfortable with him, but he saw a lot of guys pass him because I can't speak to the levels they were at. Definitely some guys who were older than him, but they were performing at a very exciting way, and he just wasn't exciting at the time. And now he's doing that while playing, I don't want to say pristine, but pretty damn good shortstop, even third base. Um, this is a guy who should be a top 25 prospect in baseball. I'm not saying he's going to be a superstar, but I think he is showing an offensive ability. Even like I don't want to compare him to Volpe, but like I think there's more to his offensive game than Volpe had because this guy just has more of a plate discipline than Volpe ever had, and he's gonna get walks even when he's not hitting it well. And I think there's, just you're talking about a 5'9" guy who was basically maxed out by the time he was 21 to a guy who's not 21 and still each summer we see him, each spring we see him, he's getting bigger and he's 6'2" and just he has this kind of this perfect athletic build, and
yeah.
he's probably still has more to put on. So yeah, it's just that upside is higher. I was saying to some friends, it's kind of funny, Franklin Arias, Red Sox shortstop prospect who's been killing it in Double A also.
Yeah.
Arias and Lombard are what we thought Volpe and Mayer were going to be. Marcelo Mayer. It's,
Yeah,
both those guys have not that Volpe's had success in the MLB, but it's not coming the way we thought it was going to come, and it's been inconsistent,
right.
especially at the plate. And Mayer can't even play shortstop anymore. So yeah, no, Lombard is just this is a guy who is going to raise that stock up even further to that top 20, especially after some graduations too
Hmm.
of guys like Connor Griffin, Kevin McGonigal. There's some few more that are going to disappear from that top 20 that will help his ascent.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
it's everything we wanted to see. When we were talking about him, you know, we were saying we still like him. We're not like turning down on him yet, but we need to see those improvements. And he's basically the only one where I would want to see more improvements from is high fastballs.
yes,
I
which
think
was
there's
an
still
issue
room for,
last year. Yep.
yep, that's still room for development. That's a thing a lot of guys struggle with.
Yeah.
It's hard.
That was a question I was going to ask you. What else would you wanted to see from him in the month of April this year? Has he
Yeah.
gotten off to, I mean, has he gotten off to about the best start you could have hoped for?
hmm And now the thing is, it's getting a little annoying because everyone's saying promote him, promote him, promote him. And while I'm willing to say, especially depending on some of it includes how things go at the MLB level,
Yep.
but if things keep going very swell for him in the minor leagues, there could be like a September promotion there. I'm willing to go back on it and say, yeah, yeah, there is a chance at 2026 now, but I don't want to rush him in double A. There's not much of an edge to go into triple A. Let him stay in double A. I want to see what happens because he's performing at a somewhat unsustainable level right now. When that BABIP starts to come down, I want to see, how he looks in the course correction. And we're seeing it a little bit, today he was like like I said, 0 for 3 last I saw. He had a nice fly out. And he hit a ball that was in the zone and he just grounded it out. So let's just see how he looks as he kind of gets stats come to normal over a longer sample size. And if it's still he's doing the things you want to see process wise, then get that promotion to AAA.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Yankees send messages about how they feel about players based on how they promote them. I'm trying to imagine in a season where they're in contention, them calling him up to the big leagues at some point, what that would mean about what they see. Because clearly, in the organization's mind, they're viewing him as a future everyday player. To bring him to the big leagues this year, that would be incredible. I'm trying to think of another time when the Yankees were in contention in first place and brought up a prospect to put in the lineup.
And some people might want to say Jason Dominguez. I just don't think that's right to compare those situations because
But
when
they,
Jason, you're talking about a guy who was injured, came back, he played some obviously in AAA. He probably had a couple months at that point, but he also was given some shots at it and he just didn't take the opportunity.
when he came up, they
Um,
weren't out of it yet. They were clearly
this was
conceding a little
2024,
bit.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
because
I'm
him
talking
and
about
Wells and Everson Pereira came up at the same
Oh yeah,
time.
2023. Yeah, but I'm also talking about 2024 after the injury he came up
No, I mean
in
to
September.
debut. I'm saying if you're going to
Oh, okay,
debut
yeah.
Lombard at the end of the year,
My bad. Yeah, very
yeah,
different. Yeah, no, you're right. And I don't think it's something they're gonna do. Like I
I
still think
don't
it's a
either.
below, but it's definitely a non-zero chance.
Yeah.
It really depends. Like Ahmed Rosario looks great against lefties right now. He's everything I wanted in that signing. McMahon obviously has been very rough, but I still, I being the optimist in me, and I keep wanting to root for him, and I keep, at least he plays good defense and he
Hmm.
walks a lot. Like
Right.
you'll take that for April 22nd.
Right.
Um, so, but yeah, who knows what that position will look like in August, and yeah, maybe if he's just absolutely dominant, you
Yeah.
can make the call.
It is a fan thing to say he looks great. How soon can we get him to the big leagues? So let's appreciate part one. He looks great, and then hope this continues.
And I
I'm going to
think we're
go
seeing a
lower.
thing with, oh,
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just sorry to cut you off for you. Just one more thought with it. And I think we're seeing it with Connor Griffin, the guy who everyone was upset about that didn't debut. He's struggling right now.
Yeah.
I think it's a very real thing we see with a lot of prospects now, the way the game has gone, where there's kind of guys are getting to the big leagues quicker than ever.
Hmm.
They're also struggling a lot in that first go because it's tough.
It's
And
hard.
do you want to put a guy who, maybe looks great in the minor leagues into your starting third base gig or shortstop gig the last month of the season, because he's probably gonna struggle. And like, is that what you want? So like, I think yeah, it doesn't mean he won't fit. Yorbit Vivas looks great really good for the Nats right now. He had an awful 20 game stretch for um the Yankees, not saying he's going to be anything more than a utility player, but it does kind of take that second time around to really get comfortable.
Yeah.
So that's just another way to urge for caution.
Yeah. So I'm going lower profile for my arrow up. I'm going to talk about Kobe Morales because, I mean, this is a guy who, again, I like the swings and he hits the ball hard. And it's a guy's got some physicality. You can ask about, well, what position is he going to play? And is this a guy who I can look at as being a big leaguer? I don't know. Yeah, he's playing first base. He's a corner player, DH type guy. Maybe obviously he's a little bit of outfield too. But he hits the ball hard. And we mentioned some names earlier of players who maybe they aren't going to be high profile prospects, but they make a name for themselves and look like they could be solid contributors. Maybe they don't make it with the New York Yankees, but they become an attractive player for another organization that's in a different competitive window. You mentioned Dylan Hasso. How different is he from a Dylan Hasso? Dylan Hasso played third base, and you could say, well, maybe there's more little defensive value there. I get that. But what if we got a guy here who's developed to the point where he's a better offensive player than that. And then I don't know. I'm happy to see guys who go from they're just there to guys you have to take seriously. And that's how I feel about him right now, is that that is not a name I gloss over. I'm paying attention to what he's doing.
Yeah, he had a rough go in Double A after promotion. I think it was like less than 30 games. Um, but it definitely looks like a guy who has kind of learned his lesson, and yeah, he's hitting the cover off the ball, and y- you know, y- y- the name is oh God, yeah, it was Rafael Flores. I feel like he kind of didn't kill it his first year, but you kind of kept watching, and then all of a sudden it clicked for him, and
Hmm.
you know. I don't know if Kobe Morales, you kind of alluding it to it, could be a guy who can like lead a trade package, but I think he could definitely be a guy who you put in one. And even besides that, you just gotta love a guy who hits the ball hard. And even for free swing guys, still get some walks. The Ks are strikeouts are a little bit of an issue, but it's not. He has a huge contact hole in his swing, and it's yeah, he's a fun guy to watch up there. Um, it's definitely a guy who I think when you're talking stock up, I think you're talking about a guy who's putting his stock into like that top 30 bit right now. Like I think he's a
Where
guy who you could realistically put in that top 30,
you could throw
whereas
his name out
before,
and not have and not be able to ignore it, or not laugh at it. That's the thing.
yeah, exactly. Like I think, you can't you're past talk thinking of him as just organizational
Yeah,
depth right
right.
now. Like he's a
Filling out a roster.
legitimate name. Yeah.
Mhm.
He's a legitimate name.
Yep.
No, he's a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah. So how about on the
Um,
other direction?
Yeah, so stock down. This is a bit of a weird one, but I'm going with Cade Smith. Um, there's another Somerset starter I was thinking about, but I go with Smith just because I wanted to believe he could be a starter. Like he has a really nasty slider and he can get a lot. He got 8 strikeouts in his last start, but the control is just really not, it's never been good enough, and I was hoping it could come under control a little bit more. And it just hasn't been there early on. A lot of walks in his starts. And the fastball velocity just isn't great. He's sitting more still in the like lowish 90s rather than the mid 90s. And I get why he's starting. Like we said, a lot of these guys will start and then move to the bullpen. That's just the natural order of baseball. There's 5 starter spots as opposed to 8 bullpen spots. Um, but when you do kind of come to that realization, like, yeah, I really don't think it's going to work as a starter. You just kind of naturally have him kind of drop a little bit. Um, and that's kind of where I am with him, where I still like him. I still like the stuff. I think he could be a fun reliever. Maybe he gets a couple MPHs to that fastball as a reliever. But yeah, I just don't think the control is going to be good enough to ever be a starter. Whereas with Kyle Carr, although I'm still like down on him ish, like he can have good, he's shown good control and he's shown a deeper pitch mix where I think you can still kind of convince yourself of him being like a fifth starter.
Mm, yeah. I'm going to cheat on my arrow down and do what I did at Hudson Valley. I'm going to say Ben Hess just because he's on the IL again. That doesn't diminish his place as a top three pitching prospect in the organization in my eyes and probably a lot of other people's. But he missed time last year and he's missing time this year. And that, like you said earlier, that's a flag. And that's something where I can't really get excited about you until you're making your start in the case of the minor leagues every week. And so far it's a concern. So no, it's not fair to say arrow down because I don't think his prospect shine is diminished any, but it's a bummer that he's
Yeah.
not pitching.
Hopefully it's nothing serious. I don't think
Yep.
there've really been any hints on it. And he was also like struggling with his control, which was a little, obviously it was early, pitching in cold games. But you look back at how he pitched in Somerset last year after his promotion, it was controlling it pretty darn well.
Mhm.
So yeah, even with that, there was a little, I don't, nothing that would have lowered his stock, but a little disappointment with
Yeah.
how he looked early on. But obviously, like I said, early on, cold. But yeah, no, injuries just are never fun. They definitely do, you know, put a little stain on things.
Yeah.
So I guess now going to guys we're holding our stock in. Xavier Rivas is a guy I love. I had him, gosh, I can't remember if I had him like just outside my top 10 or even 10 in my rankings that I put out. But he's a guy I love watching pitch. The fastball velocity obviously isn't there like we've talked about, but his splitter is nasty. His slider is very good. And he got an aggressive promotion to Double A. Yeah, he's 23 years old, but he only pitched 29 innings in Hudson Valley. So I thought, they'll let him go a little bit more there and, then make that promotion. And no, they put him right away and he struggled in Double A. The big issue is, kind of control issues and he's walking 21% of batters right now. Which yeah, it's really come to bite him early on in his 7 innings. I say that, emphasizing it deeply, and he's still striking out 27% of batters though.
Yeah.
So to me, that says is if he can, kind of get that control to a reasonable spot, as that walk rate decreases, that K rate's also going to increase. Um, and I just think, with that aggressive, it's kind of the same line with Serna and Herrera. When you're talking about a guy who you clearly see this as an aggressive promotion. There's no rush here. Um, when you watch the games, you can still see why the stuff when he throws it right, that stuff that flashes. He has some of the flashier stuff in the system. So yeah, it's just more of, I'm not gonna let 7 games move me on him. He's a guy who I think he deserves a long runway. At the toughest transition from Hudson Valley to Somerset, I think he's a guy who deserves a bit of runway. And maybe that's also, thinking back on it, maybe I am being a little unfair to Cade Smith because this is his first time in Double A also. Um, but with Rivas because he's a guy I was naturally a little bit higher on before. And I can still see being a starter.
And I think we're both Xavier Rivas fans after talking to him this offseason, so he's got
Awesome
that
guy.
runway with us. Yeah. I'm holding on Marco Luciano. And so we're talking about a guy who 2 years ago was top 50 prospect in baseball, according to the national publications. A guy who's got big league time. Yes, he's probably playing a level down right now, and he's 24 years old, I think. But it's special when it comes to the power, and you can certainly see that this isn't like everybody else. You can see the prospect here. I'm in a holding pattern though because I don't know what he is defensively, and I don't know if some of the issues that got him DFA'd in the first place are going to be solved or solvable. The contact stuff is probably going to be an issue. So it's exciting because you've got the talent of this guy. The talent is still there, and maybe they can tap into it because they've done it before and find a real player here. But I think we got to see some more before that decision comes, and
Hmm.
probably got to see it at AAA and not Double A.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I can say with full confidence is the Giants are one of the worst teams in player development in the league. I mean, obviously, kind of lumping in Luciano there, but you look at some of their misses. Luis Matos is a guy who didn't hasn't done anything. Heliot Ramos has struggled. Um, God, there's others in there, but yeah, they just have not developed talent well.
Yeah,
For as good as they are signing guys in Dominican and having them become top prospects,
right.
I guess just when they get to that higher level, it seems to fall apart. So that's like where you have that. Okay, I kind of like what we have. Like, let's see what we can. Like, he obviously has ta raw talent. Let's
Hmm.
see if we can kind of get off some of this rust before, it fully falls apart.
Yeah,
Um, I, and when I looked at him, he barely played in Double A with the Giants, and when he did, he didn't really master it. So that's why it's like I'm like in the good side of it. Yes, he's doing what he should do. Obviously, like we're saying with this whole thing, early sample size. Let's see what happens when there's some corrections. But yeah, it's definitely just, I don't think anyone should have any expectations like you do with some of these regular prospects, like of guys we've talked about. But that doesn't mean it just can't be a fun watch while we get to. And if he can get to AAA and then we can start talking, okay, can they, have they really fixed things with him that he could
yeah,
be a playable MLB player?
right.
Um, yeah, I'm enjoying it. It's been cool to see him do well in Somerset, but I don't know how much longer he really needs to stay there.
Yeah, right. So
Yes.
who's who's ready to take off for you?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. Eric Raiselman, he, going into 25, he was, I think, a hot topic name of a guy you could, make that MLB bullpen at some point. And he had some weird injuries. I feel like I remember there was like a cyst thing I can't remember, but he's had some weird things happen to him.
You're right.
He hasn't pitched a ton. Um, but yeah, when he got to AAA last year, I think he walked more guys than he struck out. It was really bad. His command just completely evaded him. I think if I remember correctly, his strike percentage was like 51%, which, if you're talking with a starter, you want a starter to be around like 63 to 66%.
Hmm.
63 being a little generous. Reliever, you can deal with a little bit lower. Um, but yeah, he just had no control. And, now he's back in AA and he's looked really good to start. I think he's only had one. I'm gonna have to look this up now because I'm actually really curious, but I want to say he's only walked a one or two batters. Um, yeah, so he's pitched 6.2 innings and he has a walk rate of 8.3 with a 50% strikeout rate. So, yeah, he has faced 24 total batters. He's walked two of them. That's, 8% walk rate with a guy who's striking out 12, half of the batters he faces. Obviously, I expect that to come down. But if you're talking
Hmm.
about a reliever who in the minor leagues can strike out 40% of guys while walking 10% of the guys, I take that.
Yeah,
Um, so it's just good seeing him kind of find himself again.
right.
And I'm, obviously he has to prove he can do it in AAA, but it's just yeah, it's let's we there's a reason we thought this guy could be an MLB caliber reliever last year, and he's still not even 25 years old. Doesn't turn 25 till the end of June. So it's just yeah, it's you remember why you like him, and you want to hold on to that just a little bit longer.
It's like his second time making this ascent, then, really.
Hmm.
All right, so I'm going to stay in the Somerset bullpen and say Chris Keene. So there's another guy who's off the radar, but I know Fangraphs likes him. I know there's been a lot of compliment about his delivery. The results have been there. The results are there now. There's some guys in that Somerset bullpen that are off to good starts. But here's one who might be a legit bullpen prospect. So I'm saying uh, buy some stock now because I think he's going to push himself into the conversation like Raiselman, like maybe Harrison Cohen has in AAA. There's going to be a guy who's there. I'm not going to tell you what's going to happen. I can't tell you he's a major league reliever. I do think he's pushed himself into the conversation, though, being at AA, having results, and having some of the eye tests to back it up.
Yeah, when I think of kind of the reliever tier list, right now Ben Grable and Giovanni Cruz are like the top tier relievers in the Yankee system.
Mhm.
Um, but then when you kind of go that tier lower, your guys like, yeah, I think they could be a quality reliever. There's, concerns one way or another. Like, I don't think they can be like bullpen aces. I don't, like Grable, I could see legitimately being like an eighth, even ninth inning guy. Um, but like, Cohen, like you mentioned, Raiselman and Chris Keene. Yeah, he's still only 23 years old. He turns 24 in June. A lot of June birthdays I've been talking about. But yeah, he's definitely a guy you kind of see in that second tier. We're like, yeah, this guy could be, maybe grow into like a middle relief option for the Yankees. Yeah, like I've seen some of his stuff. He has, a pretty nice fastball and he has pretty decent command. I know his 7.2 innings haven't been the, I guess his ERA is really low right now. It's
Mhm.
117. His FIP is, 4.38. So I think there's some, we'll see what happens as
Right.
things even out. But yeah, he's a fun watch out of the bullpen. When, there can be some pretty rough watches in minor league bullpens. He's a fun watch.
Okay. So as we go to Scranton Wilkes-Barre, I thought we'd put you on the spot, ask you
All
some
right.
thought questions here, not going off the radar, all familiar
By the
names.
way, we did. He mentioned this was going to happen, but he did not tell me any of the questions. So yeah, I'm going full improvisation here.
Yeah. So don't be scared. It's gonna be these are questions that I think people have on their mind. We're gonna see what you think about them.
All
So I'm gonna
right.
start with So right now, it's probably a bad time to ask this question after Luis Heel pitched well against the Red Sox last night. But would you rather see Elmer Rodriguez or Luis Heel in the New York Yankees rotation?
Man, I wish this had been asked a week ago, not because, so I mean, I would rather see Elmer in the sense, like, if you go back a week ago, I would rather give him 4, 5 starts, not expecting too much. I would rather see him do what Luis Gil has produced and, have those struggles because he can take that back with him. It reminds me of Will Warren 2024. He had those 20 really bad innings. And obviously, Elmer is of a higher pedigree. So if he struggled, I don't think fans would be like, oh, this guy's no good. There was a lot of that with Will Warren, which
Right.
obviously has proved to be unwarranted because
Hmm.
he had a pretty damn nice 2025 and is looking better in 26.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would have loved for him to get that little bit of experience, get to see the MLB, get to have a feel for hitters in that league, and then bring that back down to AAA until he was needed. However, now where we are, by the way, this has nothing to do with what Heal did last night. It was awesome, but it was, I it's still something where his ERA outperformed his FIP, and I'm a guy who leans more on FIP just because it relies more on what the pitcher truly does. Not that ERA is not important, but I don't think it's as important as it used to be. I digress.
Mhm.
Um, Rodon is, I think, 3 rehab starts away. So I think, you're talking about 3 more starts from heel. I still guess that would be a nice little runway for Elmer, giving him 3 starts, 15-ish innings. But, we're at this point with it where I'm not as pressed to see it happen. It's more of like, we've gotten to this point with it. 3 more starts can't kill us of heel before Rodon gets back.
Yeah, I hope it's a moot point soon, but
Exactly.
that's interesting.
But yeah, he had a really nice out. Probably his best outing in AAA. 7 strikeouts, 1 run. And I think it was like 5.2 innings tonight. So it was really good to see because for a guy who led the minor leagues in strikeouts, the strikeout stuff hasn't been there. Not that he was ever like a true, big strikeout guy. That's not going to be his MO in the MLB, but it was good to see him have like an above average strikeout game.
Yeah. All right, here's the next one. Yankees bullpen has not been a lockdown bullpen so far. Does Carlos Legrande belong in the New York Yankees bullpen right now?
Oh man, right now. So like he could totally fit in there right now. Um, you know, if you're talking like you want a long reliever, I guess you could have some worry there because he's not a guy you can trust to throw strikes reliably. But it makes me kind of want to look at the numbers of a Ryan Yarbrough and a Paul Blackburn and see what kind of numbers they're throwing out. Because I could see like where you keep him a long reliever for now and then kind of put him into that later inning role in later in the summer. Um, he can totally fit in there right now. I think that the starting pitching is doing such a good job. Max Fried and Luis Gil just went 15 innings combined over the last 2 days. Ryan Weathers has looked a lot better. Will Warren is good, and I can't even remember who the person I'm missing is. Oh, Cam Schiller is maybe the AFC favorite right now. Um, and as especially that Angels series where they were pretty frustrating. I don't think the Yankees bullpen has been as bad as it, advertised. Hedrick's been good. Bird, I think, kind of got a bit of a bad rap. I don't think he's, a guy I want trusted in the seventh inning, but I think he's a solid, like, middle relief guy that you can bring in when you're down, or if you have a couple run lead and you bring him in. Um, Drew's obviously gonna be a tightrope act, but he still has some nasty strikeout stuff. And then Bednar, besides those first 2 games, has started to look good again. And then Tim Hill is awesome. Love Tim Hill. But yeah, then you think about those last 3 spots of Blackburn, Yarbrough, and Doval. Even though I still believe in Doval or want to believe in him, like I would rather have Legrande over Blackburn for sure right now. But I get why they want to keep him as a starter. Um, because it's that's where his most value is, and I think there is a certain point in this season where you can say, we can put him in the bullpen and then focus on starter next year. I don't know if we're necessarily at that point. I respect those who do think that, but I'm okay letting him start for like at least another month and then, maybe see where we are in middle of May, Memorial Day type time.
All right. So I would not ask this question if Carlos was here.
Oh boy.
Jason Dominguez has not played a major league game yet in 2026. Does he play his first major league game for the New York Yankees or for another organization in
Oh
2026?
my gosh. I I think with the Yankees, I think that right now, I know there's been some frustration with Grisham. I still, I look at his swings, I look at those expected stats, and I say he's sitting pretty right now. And then Cody's been great, and Aaron Judge is Aaron Judge. Grichuk, I mean, I think everyone expects Grichuk, even though he's looked better this week. Grichuk's probably gonna be gone when Volpe comes back, and then Caballero and Rosario are probably gonna be like your reserve outfielders. Um, I do think the first moment someone goes down on the outfield, Jason's going to come up. I obviously hope it doesn't happen, knock on wood. Um, but would not surprise me. Cody's had a bit of an injury history. Grisham had the hamstring issue last year. Um, if something were to happen, you would think Jason's the first guy they call up. So that's why I lean Jason. I do see what Carlos is getting at because he looks really good right now. Um, and the Yankees have their starting left fielder and right fielder for at least the next 4 seasons beyond this year. And I don't know what they're going to do about center field next year, but I don't think Jason is the answer to that question, and I don't think they really like Cody Bellinger as the everyday center fielder. So I could see where if we do get to July, maybe his name I know came up last year in some conversations that didn't amount to anything. Um, I could see that coming back up again, but I wouldn't be surprised if someone gets hurt before then, so we see him for a little bit. By the way, I'm really glad he's looking well in AAA, especially against the hitting doesn't surprise me, but seeing some good at bats versus righties, and a little bit more competence in the outfield, even though I don't think it's ever going to be good, but a little bit more competence out there.
Yeah. And you set up my last question really well because Trent Grisham signed the qualifying offer, which means essentially he's on a 1 year contract. And if Trent Grisham has the same year this year that he had last year, it's possible that he extends that stay with the Yankees with a longer term contract. It's possible. But my question to you is, if not, is Spencer Jones the next center fielder of the New York Yankees 2027?
Right now, I think yeah. I think they would definitely try to bring in a right-handed guy who can play center field. Um, and do more of a true platoon with him, then, I think they trust Cody Bellinger to hit righties, lefties every day. And I think we're seeing it right now. Grisham is the guy who they take out for Randall Grichuk. I, unless, I've been tweeting about this a couple times now. Obviously he had that brutal first week, and I know today, I think he struck out like 3 times today, which, not great. But his zone contact rate has been for, 13 games now. It's been over, I think it's like right around 85%. Probably going to drop a little bit after this performance, although I'm not sure exactly, maybe there were strikeout lookings, I'm not sure. My thing with him is if he can even stay above 75%, like I think that's the floor of if he's a 75% zone contact guy, with what he does when he makes contact, that's probably enough to be like a usable player. I think if he stays above 80, you're talking about a guy who's going to be an impact player. Um, and I think everyone should be watching Munetaka Murakami really closely because he's looked great so far for the White Sox. I don't know how the season's going to go with him, but I think he's a really good litmus test for what Spencer Jones could be. The one thing Spencer does need to get a little bit better about is his chases. I from watching his games, he does a pretty good job of making contact with stuff, inside and outside, but it's the fastballs up and the especially the stuff down and in, like the sliders down in, curveballs down and in. He really, he just has no chance on those. So Right now, I think yes, but they're definitely going to bring protection in with it. But we'll, I think, we have to see what that zone contact and that chase rate look like as the season goes on.
That makes a lot of sense. All right, so that wasn't so bad. No, no hot takes involved. All right.
I try not to be too controversial.
That's not why we're here. Uh, so do you think we got it covered here?
I think we got it covered. Yeah, it's another good week for the system. You know, obviously, like we said, it's everything we're saying. This is early, and we know things are going to change, but there are definitely some real things we're seeing that are sticky for some of these guys, and we'll just have to see. We're basically making our bets right now. Like, do we think those things are going to last? And I think this is going to be. We should definitely, keep whatever you wrote these names down on. We should definitely revisit this in a couple months and wind it back the tape and see if what we said stuck or if we need to put pie on our face.
We've never been wrong yet, so I don't
Never.
expect we will be in the future either. All right, good stuff. All right, so thank you everybody for watching and for joining. Make sure you take a look at the website. There's a lot of great stuff on there now, not the least of which is Aaron's work, which has been terrific. So we'll catch you soon. Another episode of Yankees Farm Report.